This edition of MacVoices is sponsored by lynda.com, the unparalleled online video training library. For a free 10-day unlimited trial, visit lynda.com/MacVoices. And by MacVoices Magazine, our free Flipboard magazine that brings you some of the best Mac, iPhone, and iPad productivity tips on the web. High in signal, low in noise, just like MacVoices, MacVoices Magazine includes information on how you can get more out of your Apple technology. Subscribe at macvoices.com/magazine or search for MacVoices Magazine on Flipboard. Welcome to the MacJury on MacVoices. This is a Talk of the Mac community. I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, before we get into today's show, this seems a little bit frivolous to do a show like this the first weekend with the iPad Pro in the face of what happened in Paris this weekend, the terror attacks. Our condolences and thoughts go out to all the victims and everyone that had something happen bad to them over this weekend. But we also wouldn't be doing our job if we didn't stick to our guns and try to make life as normal as possible. So please recognize that we're aware of this, but we're going to keep on going just like we think we should, and we hope you agree with us. With that, this is the first weekend with the iPad Pro, and I want to introduce you to everyone who's here and who got an iPad Pro and spent the weekend with it. First up, for his first time on the MacJury, Mr. Charles Edge. Charles, it's great to have you back. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Chuck.
Yeah, this is fun. The viewers of MacVoices kind of know something about you because you've been here before, but for the people who don't, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I am a product manager at Jamf Software. I've written about 15 books about OS X, mostly on the server side. And I'm that guy behind Cryptid.com.
So you have a few qualifications to be here. One or two. Yeah. Perfect. It's good to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Next up, staying up late with us to join us is Mr. Don McAllister. Don, great to have you.
Hi, Chuck. Yes, it's 11 o'clock. Oh, it's 10 past 11 at night here. So, yeah, I've had probably a bit longer with the iPad now, the iPad Pro. But, yeah, for those who don't know me, I'm Don McAllister. I run ScreencastsOnline.com, which is a weekly video tutorial site where I cover both OS X and also iOS.
Great. Good to have you as always. And I promise I will edit out any yawns.
So. I've got my coffee, so I'm okay. So I'll be good.
Last but absolutely not least, I've been waiting to get Mr. John Martellaro back on the show simply because I wanted to hold him until the iPad Pro was here. John, it's great to have you.
Hey, it's nice to be here. So I am senior editor at the Mac Observer, and I'm starting my 10th year in a few weeks.
Wow, congratulations. You're also a bit of a newly minted podcast host.
I am. I have started a podcast at the Mac Observer. I was the one that didn't have my own, and so now I do. It's called Background Mode, and it's a one-on-one thing where I interview people that I'm interested in, luminaries, people in the Apple community, and we go for about 30 minutes, and we just kind of chat, and I find out more about the person that I think will interest the listeners. Background Mode, TMO.
Yeah, I would say, what are you, about 4 or 5 episodes, released episodes in at this point?
I've recorded several in the bank, but we've published 3 so far.
Okay, so that's good.
The latest one was with a really cool astrophysicist who talked about scientific computing on his Mac Pro. Yes. It was cool.
It was very good. They've all been good. And so, folks, I encourage you to check them out when you're not checking out MacVoices, a nice little addition to the podcast stable of Mac-oriented podcasts. So with that, let's get into the iPad Pro. We all got them. We all love them. You can probably see mine over that shoulder right back there. So Charles, how about if we start with you? And the first thing I want to get into, since we had a little bit of a hiccup when the Apple TV was released, how did you find the ordering and delivery experience for the iPad Pro this time?
I found it was great. I ordered it on the iPhone app for the Apple Store, and then when I got an email about 15 minutes later, I drove down to the Uptown store, picked it up, came back to my office. The best part of that whole experience is the manager of the store recognized my name, and so gave me the business discount for my company. So it took about an extra 5 minutes because they re-rang me up, but it was kind of worth it to save a few points on the purchase.
Oh,
it was flawless. Great experience.
That's nice.
Yeah.
That's really nice. Don, how about you? You, of course, are in England, so you have a little bit different experience, maybe.
Yeah, slightly different in that we didn't have a pickup option. Well, at least they seem to have them on at the stores, but we couldn't actually pre-book them and then go and pick them up. So I also ordered via the App Store app, the Apple Store app, and it was delivered perfectly on time. Yeah, it was slightly different from I was in the problem of when the Apple TV came out in that I pre-ordered, but they were in stores before they actually delivered all the Apple TVs to the UK people. So, but this time it was okay because I didn't have to go to the store and try and buy one and then cancel the other one. It just turned up when it's supposed to. And I actually ordered the smart keyboard as well at the same time. And that was on a week back order. But that actually arrived today. So that only arrived a couple of days following the order, which is great.
Good. We'll be anxious to hear about that too.
Mm-hmm.
John, did you have any issues or troubles or surprises?
I had no problem at all. Just like Jeff Gammett, I ordered mine midday on Wednesday. And I thought it would be available in a few days, and I'd go pick it up in the store. And 15 minutes later, I got an email that said it's in the store. So what they did was, they got my order. I told them I wanted to pick it up at the local Apple store, and they slapped a sticker on the box. And when I got there the next morning, I had my name on it and was good to go. I did not like the Apple keyboard at all. I'm touchy about keyboards, pardon the pun. And I fell in love with that Logitech Create Keyboard. That's really nice. It's backlit and has a nice writer's feel. So I grabbed that one instead. I don't think I'll ever use the Apple keyboard. It just feels too cardboardy and too stiff for me.
I did what you all did. I ordered via the iOS app. And the only thing that I was disappointed just a touch with, because my impression was that this was not supposed to be available until Friday, and that's fine. But for my time at about 3:15 a.m. in the morning, when I'm trying to focus a little bit, I'm suddenly presented with the option of, okay, you can have it delivered Friday, or you can pick it up in the store today. And it's like, if I'd have known that, I would have rearranged meetings and everything and gotten it that day. So I had to pick Friday, which, of course, I was grumping around a little bit. I talk about first world spoiled problems. I freely admit that. But to Apple's credit, it was delivered Thursday, the next day, so I didn't have to wait till Friday. So that was kind of my surprise. And since that seemed to be a topic here that everybody jumped into, I too, John, ordered the Logitech Create, which is what you see the iPad mounted in behind me.
Mm-hmm.
And we can talk about that. Charles, you didn't mention a keyboard. Did you go with the keyboard at all?
I went with the Apple keyboard, and I think I agree. It's not my type of keyboard. I guess we're both writers, so we would have the same perspective. I like a keyboard that clicks back at me, So I'm also persnickety about keyboards, mostly from the writing perspective. But I mean, it's a good enough keyboard. It's just not, for me.
So I have not seen the Apple keyboard, except obviously pictures and all. How does it compare, for those of you that did see the Logitech, how does it compare in bulk?
The Logitech is a lot bulkier. I talked to Adam Christensen, our webmaster, about it. He does MacCast, and he briefed me before I went to the store. He said, if you're interested in portability, then go with the Apple keyboard because it's thin and light. If you're interested in keyboard feel, as a writer, go with the Logitech. It's very bulky, and what I found is that the Logitech is a keyboard that you want to attach when you're ready to write and when you're ready to do things, but then the rest of the time it's joyous to have the iPad Pro separated and resting comfortably because that Logitech keyboard makes it very thick and heavy.
Yeah, that's been my experience as well. I was a little surprised because I've used one of the Logitech keyboards for the iPad Air before and really liked it. It didn't seem to add a lot of bulk. This, maybe it's because of the size of the iPad Pro. It did seem to add not only heft, but just bulk overall.
I tried folding the keyboard around to the back when I use it on my lap, and that didn't work. So I just take it out, when I'm not using it.
Yeah.
And it doesn't snap out the way I'd like either. You have to follow the instructions. You have to go in one side first where the camera port is, and then snap it in on the other side, and then reverse the process. If you try to slide it in, you'll never get anywhere. You got to follow the instructions.
You mean you actually read the instructions, John?
I had to, because you cannot slide it into the two grooves. You have to snap it in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Don, how did you find the Logitech so far?
Well, no, I got the Apple keyboard.
Sorry, you got the Apple part.
But the thing is with me, I mean, I've bought loads of iPad keyboards. I've bought iPad keyboards for the Mini and for the standard iPad, and I never really use them, to be honest. They're nice to have, but I don't. When I do my writing, I tend to write mainly, at my desktop. But I really just want to get the Apple keyboard just to see what it was like, really, and to sort of evaluate it as the first sort of iPad keyboard that Apple have actually produced. And I have to say, I've not used it very much today, but I'm quite impressed with the weight and the thinness of it. Because when the iPad arrived, my first concern, I hadn't ordered a case. I'd ordered the keyboard, and I thought, well, it was going to be, I thought, a week before the keyboard arrived. And I really felt uncomfortable about having the iPad Pro without any sort of cover. So I actually ordered the smart cover, which actually was delivered the next day, which was great. So the smart cover and the silicone case that goes behind it, they're actually in two pieces. And what I've now discovered is that you can actually detach the smart cover, leave the silicone case on, and then attach the keyboard cover to it as well. So now, if I do think I'm going to go away and I'm going to want to type on it, I can actually connect that particular cover. And if I just want portability and protection, I can just put the smart cover on. So I'm quite pleased in that respect. But on the limited time that I've had to actually try the keyboard, I was quite impressed, actually. I probably wouldn't want to go and spend prolonged periods typing on it, but for something quick and dirty, it's pretty good.
Well, the reason I got the Logitech, Chuck, was because I got big plans for this iPad Pro. I'm going to be pressing it into service. The big screen just invites you to think different and to be ambitious, and to think about it as more of a personal tool as opposed to sit in the lap and read kind of thing. And so I decided I'm going to try to be pushing it as far as I can push it in technology and workflow. And so that's why I got a good keyboard. I'm planning on writing articles with it.
John, you've been a longtime advocate, I think, of the concept of an iPad Pro, or of a larger iPad.
I have.
And I think that's pretty well documented. And you may have just made the case for why you bought it. But Charles, I want to shift over to you. Why did you buy an iPad Pro? Is this going to be, oh, I'm so sorry, folks, a laptop replacement or a supplement, or how do you see it fitting into your workflow?
For me, it's mostly testing. I do, like John said, want to push it as far as I can. In terms of laptop replacement, I was quoted on a few articles about trying to go that route as well. I think for the most part, I need to test things. There's no compiler, so I can't write software on it and things of that nature. I'm not going to be busting out the terminal and hacking the insides of it. But I do think that, for example, with the WordPress app, I can write articles like John mentioned. And with Pages and a few other apps, I might be able to push it pretty far. We'll see.
Don, was this just purely one more piece of hardware for you to review and play with?
Not really, because I'm a heavy iPad user. I do use the iPad quite a bit. If I'm not on my desk, I'll use the iPad. So I really wanted to see, and I've been looking forward to the larger screen. I especially wanted to see whether or not, now that we have these multitasking features in iOS, the slide over and the split screen. Yes, it works on the iPad Air 2, which I've been using, but I haven't really used it, to be honest, because it's still, the screen is so small when you're trying to sort of have two screens side by side. But with the iPad Pro, you sort of get two iPad mini-size screens side by side. And I have to say, I have used slide over and split screen a lot more than I did do. In fact, I've used it more in the past 2 days than I have since those features were introduced on the iPad Air 2. So that's been quite an eye-opener, really. The large screen real estate does lend itself to those particular technologies. So that's been something nice to sort of... I think in the past, I knew it was there, but because it was so fiddly to use, I really just ignored it. But now that I know that it is usable, I've actually started to use it a lot more.
John, for you, my point with this device, because this is why I got it because we started with the Mac and the screens were, like this.
512 by 384.
Yeah, and the screens went, until now we're at a 5K iMac screen. We started with the iPad, and then it went down a little bit to the Mini, and people said, well, that's great for portability, but that's, still not really it. And so now we've blown up to the Pro, and there seems to be such an opposition for going to the Pro at this size, which doesn't make any sense to me because of the development of how the Mac screen was. It just seems to me that more space equals more potential productivity.
Yeah. I don't see it as Apple dabbling with sizes. I see it as a natural progression of the technology, the display technology, the hardware. Wouldn't have been realistic to do it a few years ago. Apple had to kind of develop the technologies with the iPad Air series to get that certain feel and thinness. After using the iPad Pro for quite a while, I went back to the iPad Air, which my wife now has, and it seemed kind of dorky small and kind of like a toy. Whereas the iPad Mini that I have is just the right size for reading in bed or reading on your lap, and just for sort of casual taking with you and throw it in your backpack when you're going somewhere to the dentist office and you want to read. You don't want to carry a big, iPad Air 2 in its case. So there's use cases for all of these. And where the iPad Pro kicks in, I think, is in business and in serious development of creativity. And I was running Sky Safari Pro on there, and it's awesome. I was watching a movie on Netflix with the 4 speakers, and it's just a whole new experience compared to a 9.7-inch screen. So it's a door-opening product, and it's not a wandering, I don't think, of Apple's intentions. I think it's, in my opinion, it's a new way of thinking about an iPad. Before, the iPad was this thing where you touched and tapped, and it sat in your lap, and you perused Safari. Now you've got something that's tempting and usable, and you've got split screen, and it offers the possibility of doing a lot with it. I think the hardware is more advanced than the software is right now. I think iOS 10 is going to have to do some serious catching up to exploit the power of this iPad Pro.
Yeah, fully agree with that, because that is the thing that's holding it up at the minute. I mean, and I did at the start of the weekend think, well, I will try and seriously use it as a laptop replacement for a couple of days and see how I get on. And it is easier to use it in that respect than the smaller iPad, but there's still such a long way to go for iOS and for the apps as well. I think it's really very, very early days for developers. I mean, some apps are already optimized, but they're very few and far between. And I think we'll actually see some quite significant changes in apps over the next 6 to 12 months as people understand the use case of the iPad Pro and realize what can be done with such a large canvas. But even those few apps like Tweetbot, which is an app I use quite a bit, just the minor changes that they've made to Tweetbot to make it more suitable for that screen have made a world of difference. And it's sort of, I think the larger screen gives it, luxurious isn't the word, but it's a much more comfortable sort of, it's a much more pleasant experience. You're not sort of focused at this small area. You've got this huge canvas in front of you, and you can swipe away and you can, read things. I mean, some of the apps which have been optimized, are really horrible to use at the minute because the text is all blown up and it looks awful. But those apps that have been optimized are great, and I just think we'll see more and more of those apps being developed.
Well, speaking of luxurious, Chuck, you know personally that I dropped all of my paper magazine subscriptions and tried to go cool high tech with Zenio and Newsstand on my iPad Air, and that didn't work. And I've written about that, and it was just a nightmare trying to read a magazine in PDF format or however format they conjured up on a 9.7-inch screen. Before the show today, I fired up Zenio and took a look at Aviation Week, and it was gorgeous. It was incredible. And I think now what I'm going to do is I'm very seriously thinking about moving back to digital magazines. This is the enabler.
And digital comic books.
Of course.
Charles, I'm glad you went there, because that's something that strikes me. That has been a very positive experience on the iPads up to date. to date, excuse me. But this just should take it to a whole new level, because this feels a lot more like what that actually, the experience of reading a physical comic book in your hands. But now you've got all the benefits of the digital part. You've got all that rich cover and everything. I think that could be a game changer for that particular area.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, and I've also moved all my magazines to digital, and I have to say I don't think I'll look at them again on an iPad mini compared to looking at them on the iPad Pro. To reiterate what John said, the Netflix experience, while you can't go standard and you have to stay in landscape, is just phenomenal. Like, I didn't even use my headphones with it the other night while I was watching an entire season of some show binging. But yeah, I think when you see how Netflix is working and you see that kind of rich video environment, it just opens up a lot of things. And to kind of reiterate what Don said, when you look at an app that's just kind of, it feels like it's just zooming and the text is blurry and it's kerning and it's just not a great experience. It makes you wonder if you should even be allowed to use those apps. Like there's iPad only apps on the iPad store, so maybe there will be iPad Pro only apps at some point as well.
And I don't know that it's fair to condemn developers too much. I mean, yes, we knew this was coming, but it's just like iOS 9. Things weren't optimized for iOS 9 and for some of the new capabilities there until they could get their hands on it to see exactly what they could do with it. And once that started to happen, it was so much better. And I'm with you guys. As iOS 9 with the iPad Pro and the Wild develops, it's going to get even better.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, and I won't name names, but my sort of favorite RSS reader hadn't been optimized. So I just casually sent a note off to the developer saying, this desperately needs an update. And to his credit, he wrote back saying, yep, I'll be with you within 2 weeks, which is great, because I'm assuming that it's not really, well, I don't want to assume too much because I'm not a developer, but, it's a size thing, or the size classes and whatever. They don't have to rewrite the application completely. So it's probably not trivial, but it's something that they can actually action fairly quickly. So I'm sure we'll see the current apps being optimized for it in relatively short term. But then the exciting thing is what happens when they start to develop new apps, or if they redesign the UI to cope with the larger interface, which would be quite interesting. But I still think there's, I think it was mentioned before, iOS 10's got an awful lot to do to take advantage of it. iOS is still constrained by this sort of single focus, single pane, difficult file system type of issues that really do they prevent me from using it as a true desktop replacement. They probably don't prevent 70-80% of people who are in sort of single focus, doing single focused work or use certain applications primarily. But when you get into mixed media, when you get into using multiple applications and swapping data around, yes, they've made huge improvements, but there's still a long way to go. And I think iOS 10 really needs to sort of bring the software up to the level of the hardware.
Don, are you asking for a Finder?
Yeah,
Yeah, sounds like it. Well,
Yeah,
I am too, in a sense. I'm kind of tired of this homepage. It looks like a giant iPhone.
Yeah.
I think there's work to be done in managing your icons and launching your apps and swiping between pages and how that all lays out. I think that's too simplistic now.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't try in advance of the iPad Pro arriving. I sort of thought, well, what I'll do is I'll just put together a video one of my screencasts, which I use ScreenFlow on the Mac, and that's optimized for doing screencasts. But I get the assets that I use for the standard project, and I'll drag them into iMovie, and I'll make a template, and I'll just play with it for half a day when the iPad Pro arrives, and just see how easy it was to put together. And could I get that media? Oh, it was just a nightmare. I had problems with iCloud Drive. I was trying to get it in, then I went into iMovie, and the only way I could get it into iMovie a different way was to actually put it into Photos and wait for Photos to sync. And in the end, I just gave up because it was just too hard and too difficult. But that's an edge case. For someone who's taking videos on their iPhone or on their iPad, it will magically appear and they can edit a video and great, job's done. But when you're trying to do anything slightly difficult, it all sorts of, it's for me anyway, it all sort of falls apart.
I'd almost argue it's not an edge case. I mean, if you need to access a document on a server at work and then you need to edit it and then save it back to that server, you don't want to have to use open-end sheets, and trade data across 4 different places. It sure would be great to just drag a file into a folder, drop it off.
Yeah.
If it's going to be a laptop replacement. For my iPad mini, I don't want to do that, So for what it's worth.
But it's not a failing of the iPad Pro. I think it's a failing of iOS itself, and I think that's what they need to address.
This is just the beginning. I think the iPad Pro is a brand new breed that's going to set the stage for the further development of the iPad line.
Well, it feels like you have to rethink the iPad experience and what it could be. I think it's been fine up to this point for what it was, but and I'm not suggesting, because I've been one of the people that rails against everyone trying to replace their laptop with an iDevice, whatever size, and I still believe that it's not there. It's not intended to be there. Stop it, please. I'm just so tired of it. I think you have to decide whether this device is something that will work for you. That said, though, this has the potential for a lot more capability just because of the power and the screen size and the fact that you're able to see a little bit easier what you're doing than the Mini or even the Air.
Yeah, and I have to say, just to sort of go back a little bit on what I said before, in that with me, to do productive work, it's all about removing friction. And I've always found with the iPad that there's a considerable amount of friction there for me to do my day-to-day stuff. Even over this weekend with the larger screen, I've seen that friction be reduced, even though iOS hasn't changed since the iPad Air 2 and the iPad Pro. But just the sheer fact that you've got this extra screen real estate now, and you can use the split view more easily, and it's appropriate on that size of device. It did actually remove a lot of the friction, and I have done more on the iPad Pro this weekend than I normally would do on the iPad Air 2. Just the morning routine of answering emails. Whereas on the iPad Air 2, I might triage the emails and really not respond to them. Whereas I found on the iPad Pro, yes, I triaged them, but I also it wasn't a big deal to actually answer, just reply to a couple of emails, which is strange really because the software hasn't changed. It's just the screen's bigger, so you can see more, and you can, the keyboard's bigger, the keyboard's nicer to use, the on-screen keyboard's more advanced, there's more features on there.
Yeah.
So it has reduced friction for me in the short, in just in the past 48 hours, I have noticed a big difference.
Today's MacVoices is sponsored by lynda.com, the unparalleled online video training library. Get a free, full 10-day trial at lynda.com/MacVoices. Lynda.com is your first best choice for diversifying and broadening your skills in a huge variety of disciplines. How huge? Right now, lynda.com has officially crossed over the 4,000 video course mark, making it highly likely that there's something that will fit your ambitions. Topics like photography. Whether you're an amateur who wants to get better, an amateur who wants to turn pro, or a pro who wants to get better, lynda.com can help you with almost 600 courses on all aspects of photography. Interested in developing your programming skills? From Swift to PHP, JavaScript to MySQL, and over 400 courses in between, lynda.com has you covered. Are you an educator? Want to expand your horizons? Or maybe you want to learn more about how educators think? With 170 courses, there's a whole lot to explore. And those are just a very few of the topics that can help you make more out of your profession, your hobby, or your aspirations. With lynda.com iOS and Android apps, you can watch video tutorials anywhere and anywhen you want to, online or offline, on your iPhone, iPad, or Android devices. There are so many aspects to lynda.com, so many courses, so many different kinds of content that can help make you a better you. Find out what lynda.com can do for you by signing up right now for a free trial at lynda.com/MacVoices. That means for 10 days, you can watch any lynda.com course you're interested in, no matter what the topic, no matter what level of expertise, no matter what mix of topics you're interested in. You're going to be surprised at the depth and breadth of lynda.com's library, and you're going to quickly get hooked on what you can learn from the experts. That's lynda.com/MacVoices for a free, full 10 days of learning anything you want to learn, the best way you can learn it. Try it and you won't go back. Thanks to lynda.com for their support of MacVoices. We kind of got off onto the external keyboards. How about the new internal keyboard on the iPad Pro? it feels to me, because I spent a bit of time using it without the Logitech, just as a keyboard, and I think I find it to be better than the Air. I mean, it's still a touch keyboard, and you still got to get used to that part, but it just feels like this is a lot less of a compromise of a keyboard. Anybody else experiment with it at all?
I only played with it for a little bit, but it feels more like a regular keyboard. It doesn't feel like it's a toy keyboard where you have to press a lot of function keys to get to where you want to go.
Yeah,
and they can expose a lot more of the keys as well because they've got that more real estate to. So all the second row of numeric keys are there permanently. There is one thing that irritates me though, and I don't know if it's a UK keyboard issue, but I don't know whether or not you have tried the emoji keyboard, which I've switched on and then had to switch off again because they've swapped the buttons. It used to be the emoji keyboard, or to change a keyboard, there used to be on the UK keyboard anyway the numeric switch, basically, or the numeric button was in the bottom left-hand corner, and then there was the emoji keyboard. And now they've switched them around, so the emoji keyboard is now in the they've reversed them around. So every time I go to switch on the numerics or do something down in that bottom corner, I always end up in the emoji keyboard. So I've had to switch it off because I just couldn't do it.
I've tapped on that a few times by accident.
Yeah. It seems to be in the wrong place.
Lower left-hand corner.
Okay,
well.
so it's not just the UK keyboard then. Damn.
Charles, it sounds like everybody here so far is in favor of the new keyboard and the way it's laid out. Do you think Apple should take a cue from that and maybe shrink it back down and go with that keyboard, standardize the keyboard across all the devices, or at least the Pro and the Air?
I haven't really thought about that at all. I mean, I do like the new keyboard. Whether or not it would work at a smaller scale, I'm not 100% sure.
I don't think they've got the space to do it, to be honest. I think it's purely because it's a physically larger space that they can overlay the keyboard. They've been able to do it. So I don't think we'll see that being.
I'm using two hands more and more with the iPad Pro keyboard than I was before.
Two hands or two fingers? One on each.
Yeah, no, two hands.
So you're actually ASDF, semicolon.
Well, I do have a problem with drift of my fingers, and I ended up typing a character that's just one off, and then I get gibberish. So I don't get that tactile feedback. But I do find that I have more room to put my fingers in there and play with them. Maybe not all 10, but certainly not 2 anymore. I can actually get in there and do some typing the way I would on a bigger keyboard, and it's one of the nice things about the iPad Pro.
Maybe they could add a little shocker so that when you're, since we can't have nubs on the keyboard, they could just shock you when your fingers drift. That'd be.
Well, what we want is like Force Touch or 3D Touch, where you can have a keyboard click.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Is anyone else using the fingerprint to wake it up, or are you still doing a password?
I use my Touch ID. Yeah, it's cool.
Well, have you found a problem, Charles, or?
No, I'm just curious. Okay. I tend to keep tapping in the number on that as opposed to using Touch ID on my phone. I'm trying to get in the habit of it. I'm just so not used to doing that on an iPad.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I used to use it on the iPad Air too, so it seems natural for me to do that now. Interestingly, though, they haven't put the latest Touch ID chip or mechanism in the new machine, which is surprising, really, because it's so quick on the new iPhone, yet it's the second or the first generation in the iPad Pro, which is noticeably slower. But just interesting that they haven't put it in their flagship device.
One of the things I wanted to mention is the balance of the iPad Pro. It's not overly heavy. It weighs about as much as the first generation, I guess about 1.5 pounds. The screen is beautiful and big, as we've talked about. But when you hold it in your hand, you're holding it by the edge. And the balance seems to be a little bit less comfortable than an iPad Air, where you can't really feel like you can kind of move it around or handle it or muscle it. It's a little on the bigger side, and in my mind, it tends to want to be cradled a little more as opposed to, two-handed.
Yeah.
And supporting it with one hand. Well, because it's so thin and so expansive, it tends to want to kind of like, drop off or be not as well centered and weighted as a 10-inch iPad. And I'm still getting used to that.
But don't you think that's just the nature of that much larger a device?
Oh, sure. Sure, but it's the first thing I noticed. I mean, I said, yeah, cool, it's thin. Yeah, cool, it's light. Yeah, cool, it's got a big screen. Yeah, it's kind of unbalanced.
I only use mine holding it underneath. I almost never hold it by the edge. I almost always hold it under.
That's probably a good idea. Yeah.
I'm not sure if it's going to slip out of my hand then at some point, but
well, I worry about walking around the house with it and bumping into a door handle and having it drop out of my hand because of that. Yeah, whereas with iPad mini, it's not a problem at all.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to have found to use it mainly either on the desk where there's no problem holding it, or if I'm sitting down, in front of the TV, I'll probably not hold it. I'll sort of balance it on my leg and not physically hold it if I can, because it's it is a lot heavier. But I've noticed when I am working with it, I seem to rotate it more than I did with the iPad Air 2. I seem to prefer sort of reading in portrait mode, and then if I'm doing anything else, I'll actually rotate it and go into landscape mode. And I don't remember doing it that often, or as often as I did. Perhaps I'm sort of realizing it more now because there is some weight to this, and you're more conscious of its physicality. But I think I'm actually rotating it more and trying the different aspects out, depending on what it is I'm actually doing with the device.
I did want to cover the physicality of the device. Because I know when I first got it, when I first opened the box and took it out and held it for the first time, I thought, okay, this is bigger, but it's some of the reviewers have said gigantic, humongous. And it's like, no, it's not the size of my desk. I mean, it is larger, but I started to compare it with something like a clipboard or something of that nature.
I had that in my notes. Clipboard.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
yes,
so
I've thought about that too.
So therefore, it just didn't feel like it was, this monster thing. Now, I've been used to an Air, so maybe if I had a Mini, it would feel huge. But it is bigger, and of course, we've all seen all the size comparisons. And Don, I think you said, it's like 2 iPad Minis. Mm-hmm. But I don't know. I didn't feel like, oh my God, I don't think I'll be able to use this because it's too big. If anything, I thought, okay, now I need to figure out what case and how I'm going to carry it, because I almost feel like I'd like this to be my preferred iPad. Anyone?
Yeah, I have to say, I'll hold my hand up. I actually used humongous in a tweet, actually.
You're one of the ones.
I did think, I was blown away just how big. I wasn't expecting it to be as large as it was, although, you know in advance how big they are. But when I actually took it out the box and picked it up that very first time, because, I'd not been to the store to see them, I think it just had arrived and picked it up, I thought, literally, oh my God, it's enormous. So I hold my hand up that I did get quite blown away by how big it was, and also after using it for a couple of hours, going to the iPhone 6 Plus, thinking this tiny little thing here, this little tiny iPhone. After all the discussions we've had about how big
Don, I had the same experience, Don. After I went back and used the iPad Air, I thought, this is silly. And it didn't take me very long to feel that way.
That's right. In fact, and I saw someone else actually went back to their iPad Air 2 and thought they picked up an iPad Mini because it felt so small, which I can fully understand. Yeah.
For me, I won't be using the iPad anymore. I will just be using the Pro and the Air. I see no need for that middle one for me.
No, wait a minute. The Mini and the Pro?
Sorry, the Mini and the Pro.
Okay.
Yeah. I won't be using the iPad, the normal iPad anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because the Mini is perfect for what you want to do with it. Like I said before, when you want to carry it around and sit somewhere in a waiting room, or you want to take it to a friend's house or something. And then the iPad Pro is your go-to iPad around the house. And the 9-inch, it's ridiculous now.
Charles, what iPhone do you have?
Just a 6.
Okay, so that's because I think that might make a little bit of a difference too. If you had a 6S or 6S Plus, would you still do you think you still might gravitate toward the Mini, or would the Air be a bit more of a mid-sized device?
It's a great question. I would guess that an Air might seem a little superfluous if I had a 6S. Plus, but I can't say for sure.
Yeah.
See, I always thought that and I've said this before, that the iPad Mini is great for portability, but I always felt that the iPad Air 2 was just a little bit too large to actually take out as a mobile device.
Yeah,
and it's very rarely that I would actually take the iPad out of the house, to be honest. I mean, granted, I've got the 6 Plus and the 6S Plus, which I'm sort of used to, but I would never really take the iPad Air 2 out because it just seemed a little bit too big, whereas I would take the Mini out with me. So now, I will probably agree. The Mini's great as the go-to device for sort of taking it out with you, and the iPad Pro is the go-to device for doing the normal iPad work that I would do.
John, I think you already said that I guess you're going to be in Charles's camp that it's going to be the Mini and the Pro.
Yeah, I gave the iPad Air to my wife. It replaces her old iPad 3, so it's still in the house if I need it for testing. So I use the iPad Mini 3 on my nightstand for when I get a brainstorm and or I wonder about something in the middle of the night, or I'm checking something, or I'm reading a Kindle book in bed because it's got the right size and weight for reading in bed. So I don't expect to be using that iPad Air very much anymore, except for testing. Yeah.
One other thing that has been the highlight of the experience for me, and Charles, I'm going to pull you in on this because you were talking about Netflix as one of your first things. I'm sitting watching video on this thing, and first of all, it's absolutely gorgeous. It's a very satisfying size. It doesn't feel like a compromise size, but perhaps even better than that is the sound that comes out of this, and the fact that you're almost naturally going to sit somewhere between my screen out here and here. And I've got great sound and great stereo separation, and it's a much more immersive kind of video experience from an iPad. How did you feel since you were binging on Netflix?
I took out the earbuds, and the sound is better than it is on my MacBook Air. So from that perspective, I haven't compared it to my USB-C MacBook, but I do think that I don't really need the earbuds for quality compared to what I might have done with the iPad Mini. So,
now I have an iLove case with what's called acoustic scoops on the end that deflect the sound forward towards you. I'm hoping that iLove will do the same thing with the iPad Pro, and as a snap-on shell clear plastic case with these scoops on the end. That would be awesome. Direct the sound directly towards you.
Yeah, I quite like the and I hadn't fully appreciated before now that on the older iPads you don't actually have stereo. I mean, you have stereo if you put your earbuds in, but if you just play the sound, it's not stereo. And it's surprising just how much difference it makes, even when you're listening to music, that you have a true stereo sound field, and it just makes it more enjoyable. And also as well, I always found that sometimes you would have the iPad and you'd sort of balance it sort of on your chest, or you'd have it in your lap, so the sound would always be muffled because the speaker was at the bottom. If you have it in that orientation, the speaker's going to get muffled. Whereas now with these 4 speakers, the chances of you actually muffling one of the speakers is reduced. So that sounds much better. But also with the film thing, again, sitting in front of the TV, I sort of had it in landscape mode, and I was watching something, and I looked up at the TV, and I mean, it's a 55-inch 4K TV that I've got, so it's a fairly decent TV.
4K.
And it's 8 foot away. And
we're going to have to talk, Don.
No, it's 8 foot away, and I held up the iPad, and the iPad is actually bigger than my main TV screen. So I'm actually getting a more immersive experience with this handheld device than I am sort of with my normal TV, which was.
I saw that tweet, Don, and then all of a sudden I'm going to my couch and sitting down. Okay, but how far away is it to match it or get better? And it just does feel like a much more intimate experience if you're just doing a one-on you in the movie.
Yes,
so
that's right.
Yeah.
One thing we haven't talked about is speed. My iPad Air had 802.11n, and this is a much faster processor, and it's got 802.11 AC, and I'm seeing and feeling the difference in the speed. This screen is snapping compared to my iPad Air.
Really?
It's cool, yeah.
But had you used was it an iPad Air or an Air 2?
I had an iPad Air, and it's only 802.11n.
Okay.
Yeah.
See, I haven't noticed. It is a very snappy machine, but I haven't noticed that big of a difference because I had the iPad Air 2. So technically it is still faster, but the iPad Air 2 is quite a stable machine.
I would agree. You wouldn't notice it so much there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
When you're drawing things, when you zoom in and zoom out, you can kind of feel it's snappier on that zoom, like that GPU is really kind of helping you along in that process. It's almost imperceptible, but you can kind of feel it.
Yeah.
Or that might be my wishful thinking. Like, oh, I paid all this money, I need to do something out of it,
So how about the graphics capabilities? Everyone knows that knows me. I am not an artist of any kind. I can't draw. I can't make a stick figure look good. It's just the way it is. So that had no appeal to me as far as whether I decided to get this device or not. But do we have any artists here or anyone who's experimented with that?
I don't have a pencil. Can't get it.
Yeah, I don't have a pencil, but I do have a stylus, and I've drawn some floor plans and things like that. And it seems, it moves. You can feel that. I can also say that my daughter loves Crossy Road and a bunch of other games, and you can kind of feel the improved gameplay and graphics from that perspective as well. In fact, she'd rather,
You let her play with your iPad Pro?
Yeah, you don't know my daughter. She let me play with her iPad Pro.
I was just going to say, it's not yours anymore now. Not now.
Yeah, she I can definitely say that some of the games that we have that are on the Apple TV 2 and on the iPad Pro, she'd rather play them on the iPad Pro than the Apple TV 2.
Interesting.
Charles, I got to tell you about a cool story I read a couple years ago. This fellow had an iPad of some variety, and his daughter had been using it a lot. And one day she was in the living room, and she picked up a magazine, and she saw a cool color picture. And she tried to pinch zoom on the magazine, and nothing happened. And she said, "Daddy, it's broken."
We had a similar experience when we were traveling, and we had no juice left on any of our devices, and we were in a hotel, and we turn on like Saturday morning cartoons or something, and she's like, "How do I skip past these commercials?" I'm like, "You don't."
Yeah, it's tough.
Okay, so something I really haven't seen discussed anywhere over the weekend, and I'm kind of curious. Did you decide to set this, because everybody here had iPads of one description or another. Did you set this up as a brand new device, or did you back up and restore it from a previous iPad setup so that all your apps and everything, all your settings came over automatically?
Restore.
Restore?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Yeah,
why not?
Well, I did both. Initially, I thought, I'll set this up as a new machine, and then 2 hours in, oh no, let me go and restore all my old apps back on, because it was just too painful a process to rebuild.
Yeah, with an encrypted backup, you get all your passwords and everything. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Charles?
I set almost every device up as a new device. That's just the software tester, the developer in me. I almost never migrate data between devices. So for me, it was new.
Yeah, I'm with you, because this one, ordinarily I would do the other, but this one I set up as a brand new device. And Don, you're right. Little pain, little time consumption, but I also felt like, okay, this is good, because it's almost giving me that chance to evaluate what I think I'm going to do with this device and what I've been doing with my other one, and knowing that I can reach out and download the apps at any point. And I find that I have already accumulated. Well, I've cut down the clutter, no question about it.
One new app that I did actually install, because I'm going to use, there's a different use case for the iPad now, and it's a technology that we've had for ages and ages and ages, and that's using the iPad as a second monitor with a laptop, because I think it's Duet Display is one of the apps.
Duet. Using Duet?
Yeah, I've tested it before when I've used a normal iPad, but to be honest, the gain that you get on an iPad Air, if you're using a laptop and an iPad Air as a second monitor, is negligible, really. But you put one of these honking great big iPad Pros next to it, and it's actually a bigger monitor than my MacBook, and the performance is great. So definitely now when I'm traveling, I will be taking probably both, and when I need to, I'll be able to put up a nice dual monitor display and do some serious work.
I wondered how the Duet would work with that.
Yeah, it works great.
That's good.
Mm-hmm.
How about any other accessories or anything? I mean, I know this is very early days, but because I have a couple in mind that I want to mention. Any stands or any other things that you used with other iPads that you've played with or experimented with? Everybody's looking around. John's going for something.
I've got the stand that I used for my iPad Air, but it looks a little bit too narrow here where the two prongs hold it in the front, and I'm afraid it would tip over. So I'm looking for something that is better and bigger and more robust and heavier to support it. Anybody have any experience?
I've got two. You're not going to want to use this for landscape, but portrait is just fine, and that is this. It's called the Stump.
Ooh.
I don't know if you've seen this or not.
I have one of those.
Yeah, and it's great for everything up to the iPad Pro landscape, iPad Pro landscape, iPad Pro portrait. Gets a little bit heavy. You can use it, but I don't think I'd want to have it in an environment where it might get bumped. That works. But the other one, hang on, is this one. This is the Griffin Loop. Now, it appears that this Griffin is no longer making it. However, you can still find it on Amazon for $7. $7. And this is even better because this even feels much more stable. Again, landscape, portrait. It could be a little bit top heavy, but not. It's better than the Stump, obviously. But I've found that the iPad Pro fits in both of these very, very nicely and works great. Frankly, I think I'm probably going to be returning the Logitech keyboard. That was one of the appeals of that, and it just adds a little bit too much bulk. So, Don, I may go back to your solution of the silicone case and the smart cover.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you mentioned portrait landscape a few times there. I don't use mine in portrait mode anymore. It's almost, even when I'm writing, like multitasking and things like that, I am pretty much exclusively landscape now. Has anyone else found this similar?
Well, I don't think split screen works in portrait. I think you can do slide over, but you have to be in landscape mode to use split screen. I think that's the temptation.
And that's why.
I think it still does work, actually, although I think you can still go into split screen. But the problem is the columns are so narrow that you can't really do any work.
Yeah, I got it to work. Never mind.
And then since it rotates your fingerprint, you can just pick it up no matter which mode and touch it, and it wakes up. So, I just use it like that. I almost never use it in portrait.
I can't get it to stay split 50-50. It wants to go 1/3, 2/3 in portrait mode.
Charles, how about, I'm curious, is that an adjustment to the iPad Pro, or is that the way you were using your Air before?
No, that's an adjustment to the iPad Pro. With the Air, I would kind of go back and forth quite a bit. If I was writing, I would definitely be doing it in portrait on the Air, and definitely on the Mini. But on this, it's like I can bring up WordPress's app and write there, and then have something else to have notes or web browsing or what have you.
How about battery life, gentlemen? I did not have the opportunity to test it, say, okay, turn it on and then hit it, started playing movies and let it run until it died. But I found the battery life to be something around what I would expect from my iPad Air, depending on what I'm doing with it. So I have not found it to be a compromise at all.
I've not run it down. But again, with having so many iOS devices around the house, pretty much any room I can go to, there's normally a cable I can just plug something into. So if I'm not using something, I'll just tend to plug it in anyway. And so I've not really had a chance to run it down as of yet.
That paints this interesting picture of your house, Don, with a charging station in each room.
Pretty much.
I'm glad it didn't ship with USB-C, or I'd have to have 2 charging stations in every room.
You're one of those too, Charles?
Yeah, absolutely. Except for the bathroom. I don't have a charging station in there.
Okay.
Oh, that's true. Same here. Yeah.
Okay, good. Oh, my. Okay, so I did see one discussion early on about this device, and the discussion was, who is this for? Or should it even be looked at that way? And I hesitate personally to try to squeeze this device into any one category to say, well, if you are an illustrator, you should buy it, and if you are a programmer, you should not, or if you are a gamer, you should, and if you're something else, you should not. So I guess that's where I'd like to end this. What do you think about how the iPad Pro, how should it be seen by a potential buyer or potential user? John, I'll give you first shot at that.
Well, I think it opens up new markets better. I mean, all the iPads can be used for everything, but I think it's especially useful in certain markets like point-of-sale terminals, displays, real estate agents where you want to show something to a customer and you don't want to have a little tiny screen. Military mapping comes to mind as a use for being in the field where everybody can see what you're doing and showing. So I think it takes certain markets and propels them to a higher level.
Don?
Yeah, I mean it's a difficult call really, because an iPad really is dependent on what software you run and what you actually want it to do. So I would say that if someone's an experienced iPad user already and they're getting great value out of their iPad Air or Air 2, yeah, sure, go ahead. If you're a new iPad user, again, there are use cases for it. The graphics side of it, which we haven't really touched on today, we haven't mentioned the pencil because it's not available. I think it's a bit of marketing genius that Apple have done to withhold the pencil for a couple of weeks to stimulate the conversation around the iPad Pro and get the buzz going. And then when the pencil comes out, we'll be having the same conversation again about how we use the pencil and what's done. So, if you're a graphic artist, I think it's a no-brainer that people, if they're using Wacom type devices or if they want to do digital work, that it's a no-brainer for digital artists. But, I think we will see other markets, we'll see other applications. Give it 12 months. I mean, goodness knows what's going to happen in 12 months when the next one comes out with 3D touch and all extra bits and pieces, and it's thinner and lighter, and there's probably I don't think it's going to get any bigger, but I think it's basically if you can fit it into your workflow. If there's applications that you use already, yeah, it's for pretty much anyone really. I wouldn't restrict it to anybody or any one particular person.
Charles, after consulting with your daughter, how would you see the iPad Pro?
It's definitely for her. My grandmother, her MacBook is broken, and she was asking me, "Oh, will you fix it when you come home?" I'm like, "Well, I'd rather maybe just give you an iPad Pro and not have you have a computer anymore." I think the number of people who can use it as a laptop replacement is increased by it. So I don't think it's restricted to anyone. I think it's available for more. I don't think it can be used as a laptop replacement for everyone. Certainly not podcasters, as the three of you have discovered. And I'm not a podcaster yet. Maybe I should start one. But I think it's got to be looked at from a different lens. It's not just another iPad. It's another device. And I don't want to say it's disingenuous to call it an iPad, but the very first thing I thought when I looked at it was, oh, that's luxurious. And I actually used the same word John mentioned earlier, luxurious. And I even drew it out a little bit because it's just that big. But then as I've been using it and I've been seeing what, for example, Tweetbot and some of the other apps have built in for the enhanced workflows, for me, it's definitely become, I'm looking at it as more than just another iPad. So, having said that, there's no Xcode, so I can't really use it for everything I need to do.
Give it time.
Yeah, hopefully.
I guess I feel like one thing that's being undervalued here on this iPad or under-recognized is just the benefits of the larger screen, of the better sound. That the idea of a laptop replacement is nice depending on what you did with your laptop in the first place. For a lot of us, no chance. But I know a lot of people that it will be. And the larger screen, I think, makes it that much more attractive. And the pricing does seem a little bit much for an iPad, but it's not out of line for a decent-sized laptop. And I'm not talking about a MacBook Air or any of the smaller Windows machines. So I think it's almost in parity there. And I think there's something to be said for the idea that this is all the computer that a lot of people are going to need.
Well, Chuck, as the apps develop and as the hardware improves, I think it'll be interesting to see how far we can push it. it's not a replacement for OS 10 for people who have certain workflows. But over the next year, as we get iOS 10 and new facilities and APIs and new apps, I think we'll be spending a lot of time talking about how much more we're doing with an iPad Pro than we ever did with our iPad Airs.
John, one thing I hope developers do, though, from my perspective, is I hope they look at this, not, you said pushing it. Yeah, push it, but push it in a couple directions. Push it in our direction, the four of us who want all the power features and that kind of thing. But also push it in almost a simpler direction for the folks who really don't need to run Xcode or 3 browsers or those kind of things, but are just interested in doing some of the more basic personal computing stuff. Then I think Charles is absolutely right. It'd be a perfect machine for his grandmother.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it's not a good camera. Hopefully I don't see people like at historical landmarks like trying to take pictures of them with this thing.
But don't forget all those sextant and navigation apps where you use the camera to display on the screen instead of not photography, but right. Passing the image through and using it.
Yeah, that
for geodesy and sextants and yeah.
Yeah, but you know, Charles, that you're going to see that. I mean, because it's going to be the camera that people have with them. So, they're going to hold it up.
It's going to block even more of my view than the iPad Mini already blocked when I saw that.
Yeah, there is that little detail. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for this. I think it's been interesting. Any closing thoughts that you want to offer? Any favorite apps, any plugs, or anything else that you want to throw in? Charles, I'll work back the other direction. What do you think?
I feel like I'm cheating by saying Tweetbot because Don already mentioned it, but I have to say that is like the template that I've been looking at how people can advance apps. They're different apps, and I've sent maybe 10 emails to different vendors like, hey, you should add something like this. As a product manager, I'm sure their product managers are like, shut up already. but I would say that. All my daughter's games, and Netflix is really a fantastic experience on the new device. So,
Don?
Not so much software to mention, although I did have a dabble with some. But the thing I would mention is, I've been using the Apple keyboard for with my Mac, and I've been quite happy with that. The Magic Keyboard that came out. But I was sort of experimenting with before the Apple keyboard for the smart keyboard for the iPad Pro. Before that arrived, I was experimenting with my old faithful Logitech. I think it's a K811. So I had this, and the nice thing about this is that it has 3 separate Bluetooth configurations. So I was able to have my iPad Pro, which actually just fits nicely underneath my main monitor, and have one Bluetooth connection going to the Mac Pro and one Bluetooth connection going to the iPad Pro, so I could just switch between them. And that worked really well, although I have to say there was a little bit of, it took a little while for the iPad Pro to configure itself to use the keyboard. But once it had, I was able to sort of switch between them fairly easily, and that was great for using this as a separate device, but that's just a single keyboard and just switching between them. I'll probably do a lot more of that in the future. So,
good. John?
That's my tip.
The word that came to mind while you guys were talking was unleashing. Before we watched movies on a 9-inch screen and the sound wasn't so good, and now we've got a big screen and the sound is great. Before we tried to read magazines on a 9-inch screen, couldn't do it, and now Zenio is glorious with the magazine. So everything is just done right the way a tablet should be. It's almost as if everything was shackled and kind of we were looking through the glass darkly and we saw kind of like an image of what an iPad could be, and then all of a sudden Apple unleashed the limits, and now we can do all these things in a glorious, luxurious, unleashed way that we were wishing for all along, but we could never do on a small iPad.
Good. The only thing that the app that I've seen that really struck me is one of my favorite apps anyway on any device, any iPad, and that's Flipboard. They did release an update over the weekend, and it was good before. It's so much better now. So,
glorious.
Yeah. So, and that is, there's that word again. So go check that out too. Last thing as we wrap up, to go around the room, let folks know where they can find you, Twitter, websites, whatever. Charles, start with you.
Crypted.com, KRYPTED.com, and CEDG E318 on Twitter.
Great. It's good to have you here for the first time. Hope you'll come back.
I would love to, Chuck. Thanks for having me.
Great. Mr. McAllister?
Yep, you can find me over at screencastsonline.com, where I have the weekly tutorials. I'm also on the newsstand as well. We have Screencast Online Monthly, which is a monthly magazine that contains all the monthly videos plus articles and various bits and pieces. And then also over on Twitter as Don McAllister.
Okay. John?
Okay, you can find me at the Mac Observer, where I'm a senior editor, macobserver.com, and on Twitter I am the letter J, and then Martellaro, last name.
Great. Good to see you all. Thank you so much for being here, and enjoy your iPad Pros.
Thanks, Chuck.
Thank you.
All right, cool.
Folks, I'm Chuck Joyner. This is Mac Voices. You can find me as Chuck Joyner on Twitter, and of course everything that goes on with Mac Voices at macvoices.com. We hope to see you again soon, and this is the MacJury on Mac Voices. Thanks for watching. Visit macvoices.com for links, show notes, to subscribe, to connect with Chuck on Twitter, Google+, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and the Mac Voices blog. Subscribe to our weekly newsletter, the Mac Voices Dispatch, to stay up to date on all the latest Mac Voices news from our front page or at macvoices.com/newsletter. Do more with your Apple tech by subscribing to the free Mac Voices magazine on Flipboard by visiting macvoices.com/magazine. Advertising and sponsorships handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.